Usually when we think about a terminal medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of a really stark, almost clinical dividing line.
Right. Yeah, like a sudden pivot.
Exactly. You get the news, maybe the doctor points to a shadow on a scan, and suddenly your reality is just neatly, violently sliced into two halves.
The before and the after.
Yeah, the before and the after. It's like a
Right.
door slamming shut on the act of living, forcing you into this really grim transition into, well, just the sheer mechanics of dying.
I mean, the psychological landscape is just assumed to become incredibly narrow, right?
Right.
You're expected to just focus entirely on biology, on decline, and fear.
But then you step into the world of Oliver Sacks, specifically his final writings,
Mm.
and that dividing line just completely dissolves. It entirely blurs.
It really does. It's fascinating.
Right. Because we're looking at a psychological landscape that stays incredibly vibrant, defiant, and deeply complex, even as, the biological clock is quite literally running out. So, welcome to the Book Nook.
Yes. Well,
We're dedicating our time today to a deep dive into one of the most poignant, transformative texts in modern psychology and personal growth. It's a really slender, yet just immensely heavy collection of writings called Gratitude.
penned by the legendary neurologist and master storyteller himself, Oliver Sacks.
Exactly. And to really understand the weight of this text, we got to look at the timeline, right? Because Gratitude is not, it's not a single retrospective narrative written after the dust has settled.
No, not at all. And it's not a memoir drafted in the prime of his life either. It's actually a quartet of essays.
A quartet, 4 essays.
Right, 4 essays. And they were written in the final 2 years of his life. So from July 2013 right up until August 2015, which is literally weeks before he passed away.
Wow. So we are witnessing a mind, like, mapping its own dissolution in real time.
Exactly. It's real-time documentation.
Which is wild. So I want to set our mission for today right up front.
Yes.
To you listening right now, this is not going to be a morbid discussion about the physiological mechanics of dying.
Please, no.
Right. This is a profound, life-affirming masterclass in living. Our goal today is to unpack how one of the most brilliant, endlessly curious minds of the last century navigates aging, illness, and the ultimate search for peace.
We are going to extract some incredibly powerful takeaways for our own personal growth, exploring not just what he felt, but the underlying psychology and, well, the neurology of how we process our own mortality.
Yeah, and the rarity of what Sacks offers here, I mean, it just cannot be overstated.
It's so rare to get this.
Because typically, accounts of terminal illness are, they're heavily mediated.
Oh, absolutely. They're usually written by survivors looking backward through the lens of recovery.
Or they're pieced together by family members after the fact.
Exactly. But here, Sacks is charting the territory as he is walking through it. He's applying the exact same observational rigor to his own failing body and shifting mind that he applied to his neurological patients for 50 years.
It's honestly beautiful. His prose is just so clear. So let's dive in. We're going to start exactly where Sacks starts the collection, which is actually this moment of profound joy.
Yes, a very happy moment.
We're in July 2013, just days before his 80th birthday. And crucially, this is before he knew his cancer had returned.
Right, which sets this brilliant baseline for how to approach the winter of our lives before any actual crisis hits.
Yeah. He writes an essay titled Mercury. And true to his nature, he intertwines this very human milestone with the physical universe.
Which is so Sacks. I mean, he had this lifelong obsession with the periodic table of elements.
Yeah, it wasn't just a scientific tool for him. Right?
No, it was an emotional anchor. He actually notes that when he was 11 years old, he identified as sodium.
Sodium?
Yeah, because sodium is element number 11.
Oh, I see. That's kind of adorable.
Right. And then at 79, he was gold, element 79. And now, anticipating his 80th birthday, he literally dreams of Mercury, element 80.
He has dreams about it.
He envisions these huge, shining globules of quicksilver just rising and falling.
Okay, let's explore the mechanics of that obsession for a second. Because why the periodic table? I mean, for most people, that's just some chart on a high school chemistry classroom wall that you memorize and forget.
Well, for Sacks, these elements represented absolute constants. And mercury in particular is fascinating because it's a metal, yet it is fluid at room temperature.
Right, it's liquid.
Yes, it's incredibly heavy, yet it slips right through your fingers.
Oh, wow. That is a beautiful metaphor for a man turning 80.
Isn't it? Feeling the immense weight of a long life, yet feeling how quickly it just slips away.
Yeah. He even mentions a friend to whom he had previously given a special, unbreakable bottle of mercury for their 80th birthday.
Oh, I loved that part.
Yeah, and the friend joked back in a letter, "I take a little every morning for my health."
That's hilarious. But that underlying quirkiness, it kind of masks a profound shock at his own longevity, you know? He writes about the surreal nature of outliving one's own internal narrative. He states, "I often feel that life is about to begin, only to realize it is almost over."
That is heavy. But it touches on a really fascinating psychological phenomenon regarding our internal avatar.
Oh, absolutely. The physical body ages, cellular degradation occurs, but our internal sense of self, the neurological narrative we construct about who we are, often remains anchored in our youth.
Yes, Sachs still felt like the youngest boy in his high school class.
The youngest of four brothers.
The youngest of this vast cousinhood. I think we all experience that temporal dissonance to some degree, right? Like you look in the mirror and you're momentarily surprised by the face looking back.
Because in your mind's eye, you are permanently 35.
Exactly. But Sachs's surprise at making it to 80 is also rooted in a very specific traumatic personal history. He actually recalls a moment at age 41 mountaineering alone in Norway.
Right, where he took a catastrophic fall.
A terrible fall.
He ruptured his quadriceps tendon, completely detaching the muscle from the kneecap. Ugh, I can't even imagine.
And he was entirely alone on a freezing mountain,
Yeah.
completely incapable of walking. He had to splint his own leg with an umbrella, of all things.
An umbrella.
Yeah, and he had to clumsily lever himself down the rocky slope using only his arms.
Mm-hmm.
He was utterly convinced he was going to die of exposure or shock right there on the rock.
But the psychological reaction he describes during those hours, facing imminent death at 41, is what really caught my attention. Because it wasn't sheer terror.
No, it wasn't.
He says he was assailed by memories, and most of them were in a mode of gratitude. Gratitude for what he had been given by others, and gratitude that he had been able to give something back.
Specifically, his landmark book, Awakenings, had just been published.
Right. Let's break down the neurology of that response, because it honestly seems counterintuitive. Like, in a survival situation, shouldn't you be panicking?
Well, yes, initially. The sympathetic nervous system is highly activated. Adrenaline and cortisol flood the system to mask pain and prepare for fight or flight.
But when death becomes an accepted inevitability in the brain, we often see a profound shift. The parasympathetic nervous system can engage, creating a dissociative, almost euphoric state of life review.
Oh, wow. So the brain just switches gears.
Exactly. The brain, rather than panicking over a future that no longer exists, frantically catalogs the past to construct a complete narrative.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And Sachs survived, obviously. And now, at nearly 80, that foundational brush with death leaves him with this lingering baseline of appreciation.
He notes that the phrase, "I'm glad I'm not dead," sometimes just bursts out of him on a beautiful day.
Which is so joyful. And he contrasts that baseline so perfectly with a story about the playwright Samuel Beckett.
Oh, the story's great.
A friend of Sachs was walking with Beckett in Paris on a gorgeous spring morning and asked, "Doesn't a day like this make you glad to be alive?"
And Beckett, ever the existential pessimist, replied, "I wouldn't go as far as that."
I wouldn't go as far as that. I mean, Sachs is the absolute anti-Beckett here. He is ravenous for life. But, and I think this is important, he's also brutally honest about his regrets.
Yeah, he doesn't sugarcoat it.
He admits he's sorry he's wasted time, that he is still agonizingly shy at 80, that he speaks no other languages, and that he didn't travel enough.
Which brings up the psychological concept of a completed life. I mean, how do we define when a life is actually finished?
That's the big question.
Sachs observes patients in their 90s or over 100 who state they've had a full life and are ready to go, and they often conceptualize that readiness as transitioning to an afterlife.
But Sachs is a staunch secularist.
Extremely secular. He has no belief in or desire for any post-mortem existence.
Right. He points out that historical figures like the writer Samuel Johnson or his biographer James Boswell were absolutely paralyzed by the terror of going to hell.
But Sachs is completely free from that specific anxiety. For him, eternity is purely cultural and intellectual. It's the hope that his books might still speak to people after his biological form is gone.
So if there's no afterlife to prepare for, what actually makes a life complete in the secular psychological sense?
Well, he leans heavily on Sigmund Freud here.
Okay, Freud.
Specifically, Freud's assertion that the two most important things in life are the liberty to continue to love and to work.
Love and work.
Yes. From a psychoanalytic perspective, Love and work, Leben und Arbeiten, are the twin pillars of human psychological stability.
And work in this context isn't just, like, wage labor, right?
No, it's the application of one's energy toward a meaningful outcome. And love is the capacity for deep relational attachment.
Got it.
So as long as Sachs can do those two things, his life is not just continuing, it is active. He actually cites Francis Crick, the co-discoverer of the DNA double helix.
Oh, yeah.
When Crick's colon cancer returned, he reportedly looked into the distance for a minute, absorbed the terminal reality, and then went right back to his train of thought.
That is incredible focus.
Crick died at 88,
Yeah.
still fully engaged in his creative work. Sachs states he hopes to die in harness just like that.
And that brings us to his view on the 80s as a decade, which I found just incredibly uplifting. He echoes his father, who lived to be 94, who said the 80s were one of the most enjoyable decades of his life.
Yes. Sachs says he feels not a shrinking, but an enlargement of mental life and perspective.
An enlargement.
He says at 80, you have a vivid, lived sense of history. You can feel in your bones what a century is like.
It completely upends the cultural narrative of aging as, like, a strict biological subtraction.
Absolutely. We assume old age is just youth minus energy minus mobility minus memory, but Sachs argues it's an addition of perspective.
You know, it makes me think of climbing a massive, towering mountain.
Oh, I like this.
When you're young, you're at the bottom of the trail, right?
Yeah.
You're running, your cardiovascular system is peaking, but you are looking down at your boots. You're dodging rocks, focused entirely on the dirt immediately in front of you.
Your view is completely restricted by the trees.
Exactly. The dense trees and the immediate slope. But as you get near the top, into your 70s and 80s, the mechanics change. Your joints ache. You have to husband your energy, but the vista opens up.
You can finally lift your head.
You can see the entire landscape. You can see how the rivers connect, where the storms are coming from. The perspective is breathtakingly wide, precisely because you are at the end of the climb.
That analogy perfectly captures what Sachs calls being freed from the factitious urgencies of earlier days.
Fictitious urgencies. I love that phrase.
Right. When you're young, your brain is wired by evolutionary imperative to care desperately about social hierarchy, mate selection, career accumulation.
Those are the trees blocking the view.
Exactly. At 80, those biological and social urgencies fade. The neurological bandwidth that was previously occupied by anxiety over the future can now be reallocated to synthesizing the meaning of the past.
Wow.
He is free to explore whatever he wishes, to bind the thoughts and feelings of a lifetime together.
So if you are listening to this deep dive right now, I think this is a crucial moment to audit your own perspective.
Yeah.
How do you view old age? Is it this shadow creeping toward you, like a grim biological tax you eventually have to pay?
Or could you choose to see it as Sachs does?
Exactly. As the summit of the mountain, a time of profound psychological freedom, where the frantic noise of youth falls away, and you are finally granted the space to understand the map of your own life.
It requires a deliberate paradigm shift. But as with all human endeavors, that expansive view from the mountaintop is fragile.
Yeah, it doesn't last forever.
The serene contemplation Sachs achieves at 80 is about to be violently interrupted.
18 months pass after that joyful 80th birthday. We are now in early 2015. And Sachs gets the devastating abruption.
The diagnosis.
Yeah. 9 years prior, he had been diagnosed with a rare ocular melanoma. It was a tumor inside his eye, which had left him blind on one side. But the statistical odds of it metastasizing in his specific case were, like, incredibly low.
Very low.
Yet, he writes, I am among the unlucky ones. The cancer has returned, it has traveled, and it has aggressively occupied a third of his liver. It is definitively terminal.
Let's explain the pathology of that for a moment, because it dictates his entire reality from this point forward.
Yeah. How does eye cancer end up in the liver?
Well, ocular melanoma is a cancer of the uveal tract, which is the pigmented layer of the eye. Unlike many cancers that spread through the lymphatic system, ocular melanoma almost exclusively spreads hematogenously, meaning through the bloodstream.
Through the blood. Okay.
And because the liver is the body's primary blood filtering organ, passing massive volumes of blood every hour, the liver is almost always where these stray cancer cells end up taking root.
Ah, I see.
When it colonizes the liver to that extent, the prognosis is measured in months, not years.
And his immediate response to this death sentence is staggering. He writes, I am now face to face with dying, but I am not finished with living.
He realizes it's entirely up to him to choose how to allocate the cognitive and emotional bandwidth of the months that remain.
Right. And to figure this out, he turns to history. specifically to one of his favorite philosophers, David Hume.
David Hume is a fascinating anchor for Sachs to choose here. Hume was a giant of the Scottish Enlightenment in the 18th century. He was a pioneer of philosophical empiricism, which is the idea that all knowledge comes from sensory experience.
Okay.
In 1776, upon learning he had a mortal bowel disease at age 65, Hume wrote a short autobiography in a single day.
In a single day.
Yep. Also titled My Own Life. Hume wrote about how he suffered very little pain, maintained his spirits, his ardor in study, and his gaiety in company.
Hume described himself as a man of mild disposition, with great moderation in all his passions. And here is where Sachs pivots, because he reads Hume's serene, moderate acceptance and basically says, well, that is definitely not me.
No, not at all.
Sachs flatly denies having a mild disposition. He calls himself a man of vehement disposition with violent enthusiasms and extreme immoderation in all my passions.
I love that.
He fully embraces his intensity. He refuses to go quietly or mildly.
But there is one specific concept from Hume that Sachs adopts entirely.
Which is?
Hume wrote, "It is difficult to be more detached from life than I am at present."
Detachment.
Yes. Sachs feels this sudden, profound sense of intentional detachment washing over him. He describes a sudden, clear focus and perspective. He realizes there is absolutely no time for anything inessential.
He stops watching the nightly news.
He stops paying attention to politics.
He stops engaging in arguments about global warming.
Ah.
Let's pause there and debate this, actually, because this specific point caused friction for me when I read it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. If you are a brilliant, influential thinker like Oliver Sacks is stepping away from the great existential threats of our time, issues that are mentioned in the text, like massive inequality, political instability, and climate change, is that a luxury reserved only for the dying?
I see where you're going with this.
I look at that and think, if everyone adopted that detachment, society would collapse. It feels a bit like throwing your hands up and saying, not my problem anymore. Should we really be taking personal growth advice from a man who is actively disengaging from the world's problems?
That is a very fair critique. If you view his detachment as apathy, it is problematic. But we have to distinguish between apathy and the ruthless prioritization forced by a finite timeline.
Okay, distinguish that for me.
Sachs is explicitly clear. He says this is not indifference but detachment. He still cares deeply about the Middle East, about global warming, about growing inequality, but he recognizes a fundamental limit of physics and biology. He will not be here to solve them. Those problems belong to the future, and his future is measured in weeks.
But doesn't that imply that caring about global issues is just a factitious urgency?
No, it implies that human cognitive bandwidth is a zero-sum game. When you have 60 years left, dedicating bandwidth to climate change is essential because you are part of the ecosystem that will endure it.
Right.
When you have 6 months left, every hour spent agonizing over a political debate is an hour stolen from straightening your accounts with the world, saying farewell to those you love, and finishing your life's work.
Oh, wow. That hits hard.
The tragedy Sachs is highlighting isn't that he stops caring about the world. The tragedy is how much time we spend on inessential arguments, like fighting with strangers on the internet while operating under the delusion that we have an infinite supply of time.
Sachs is pointing out that we are all on a clock. His is just visible.
Exact.
That shifts the perspective entirely. It is an economy of energy. And it leads him to this incredible realization about human uniqueness. He notes that his generation is on the way out, and he feels each death of a peer is a tearing away of a part of himself.
Yes.
But then he applies his neurological background to mortality. He says that when people die, they leave holes that cannot be filled, because it is our genetic and neural fate to be completely unique individuals.
He writes that it is the destiny of every human being to find his own path, to live his own life, to die his own death.
This is a stunning synthesis of existential philosophy and deep neuroscience.
It really is. Sachs is referencing the concept of neuroplasticity here, and specifically a theory championed by his contemporary Gerald Edelman called neural Darwinism.
Wait, explain how neural Darwinism works in this context. I'm not super familiar with it.
So neural Darwinism suggests that the brain is not like a computer that comes pre-programmed. It's more like a dense, overgrown jungle.
Okay, a jungle.
Throughout your life, every single experience, every book you read, every trauma you endure, every person you love literally wires and rewires the physical structure of your brain. Synapses that fire together wire
The
together.
ones that don't?
Synapses that aren't used are pruned away. So because no two humans, not even identical twins, have the exact same sequence of experiences, no two human brains are wired exactly alike.
So when Sachs says a person leaves a hole that cannot be filled, he isn't just being poetic about grief.
No.
He's speaking biological truth.
Exactly. When a human being dies, a completely unique, unrepeatable neural architecture is permanently erased from the universe. There has never been and will never be another you.
That is profound.
The specific way your brain connects a childhood memory to a favorite song, to a specific fear, is entirely singular. Sachs finds deep comfort in this. He honors the irreplaceable nature of a single human life.
He mentions rejoicing when meeting gifted young people like the young medical resident who actually biopsied his liver metastases because he knows the future will be shaped by their unique architectures, even as his is dismantled.
Yes.
If you are listening to this right now and you find yourself agonizing over it, like an email your boss sent this morning or spiraling over a political argument on social media, Sachs' perspective forces a really uncomfortable question.
What is that?
What are the truly inessential things occupying your limited bandwidth today? If you were handed a scan with a shadow on your liver, how quickly would those anxieties just evaporate?
Very quickly.
And why do we wait for a terminal diagnosis to grant ourselves the permission to focus only on what is essential?
We wait because the illusion of infinite time is a necessary evolutionary shield.
A shield, yeah.
If we were constantly aware of our mortality, we might never plant crops or build cities. But Sachs asks us to pierce that shield just enough to recalibrate our priorities.
Right.
But what I find equally compelling is what Sachs actually does focus on once he strips away the daily news cycle and the societal anxieties. Because he doesn't just look inward at his friends and his memories.
He looks outward, way outward.
Into the very fabric of the physical universe.
Yeah. Once Sachs detaches from the anxieties of humanity, he turns to the eternal, immutable laws of the universe. Even with terminal cancer ravaging his liver, even while undergoing brutal medical treatments, he is still eagerly anticipating the weekly arrival of journals like Nature and Science.
But he's not turning to the biology or medicine sections to read about his disease.
No. He turns entirely to the physical sciences.
He notes that it was the physical sciences that provided his very first enchantment as a young boy. And in his final months, he gets incredibly excited about a specific physics article.
Oh, this part blew my mind.
It's an article by the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Frank Wilczek. Wilczek had published a new, highly complex way of calculating the slightly different masses of neutrons and protons.
I read that and thought, why on earth is a dying man spending his precious hours geeking out over the mass of subatomic particles?
It sounds absurd at first.
It does. But Sachs explains the profound existential weight of this calculation. He marvels that neutrons are just very slightly heavier than protons. The ratio is 939.56563 to 938.27231.
To understand why this comforts him, we have to look at the mechanics of the universe. Protons and neutrons are made up of smaller particles called quarks.
Quarks. Right.
Specifically up quarks and down quarks. A proton is 2 up quarks and 1 down quark. A neutron is 1 up quark and 2 down quarks. Because the down quark is slightly heavier, the neutron is slightly heavier than the proton.
And why does that tiny fraction of a decimal matter to human existence?
Because if that ratio were even slightly different, if the proton were heavier than the neutron, protons would be unstable. They would capture electrons and turn into neutrons.
Okay.
If protons are unstable, you cannot have hydrogen because a hydrogen atom is just 1 proton and 1 electron. If you don't have hydrogen, you don't have stars, you don't have water, you don't have complex chemistry. You have a universe filled with nothing but cold, inert neutron gas.
Oh my God.
There is no biology, no evolution, no Oliver Sacks, no us.
So he is facing his own immediate biological non-existence. And he is finding deep comfort in the absolute mathematical precision that allows existence to happen at all.
Exactly.
It's the ultimate macro perspective. He contrasts this mathematical certainty with his old friend Francis Crick's obsession with the hard problem of consciousness.
Crick believed that we would understand how the physical brain gives rise to subjective consciousness by the year 2030, and told Sachs he might live to see it.
The hard problem, which was coined by philosopher David Chalmers, is the question of why and how physical brain processes feel like anything at all from the inside, right?
Right. We can map the easy problems, how the eye processes light, how the motor cortex moves a muscle. But how does a collection of wet cells generate the subjective feeling of awe or grief.
And Sachs, one of the greatest neurologists of our time, admits he doesn't even see consciousness as a hard problem at all.
It's a brilliant, slightly cheeky stance.
Very cheeky.
For Sachs, consciousness isn't some mystical, separate substance that needs a magical bridge to the physical world. He views it as a deeply embedded, emergent property of complex biological systems, shaped by evolution and time.
He accepts the mystery of it without needing to turn it into a philosophical crisis. His real sadness isn't that he won't solve consciousness, it's that he won't live to see the new breakthroughs in nuclear physics.
This turn to the physical sciences isn't just a late-in-life hobby for him, though. It is a lifelong coping mechanism.
Yeah, he explains that when he was sent away to a brutal boarding school at age 6, at the outbreak of the Second World War, he dealt with the profound trauma, the bullying, and the loss of his family by turning to numbers.
They became his friends.
When he returned to London at 10, the elements and the periodic table became his companions. Throughout his life, in times of extreme emotional or physical stress, he turned to a world where, as he puts it, there is no life, but also no death.
We can understand this through the lens of emotional regulation. Human biology is messy. It decays, it feels pain, it is subject to disease and irrational cruelty.
But the physical laws.
The physical laws of the universe are pristine. They do not care about your tumor. They do not care about World War II. They operate on absolute, unfeeling rules.
Imagine you were in a small wooden boat on the open ocean, right? And the most violent storm of your life hits. The waves are towering, the wood is splintering, your biological reality, your body is failing and being violently tossed around.
It's terrifying.
Turning to the physical sciences, for Sachs, is like dropping a massive heavy iron anchor right into the seabed beneath the storm. That anchor doesn't feel pain. It doesn't worry about the future.
It operates on the absolute laws of gravity and mass.
It just is. And by holding onto the chain of that anchor, you find stability when everything else is chaos. The inorganic world is his anchor.
And he literally manifests this anchor in his physical space at the end of his life.
Oh, his writing table.
Yes. He surrounds his writing table with these physical elements. He describes the table, at one end, a charming box of thallium, element 81, sent by friends for his 81st birthday. Then lead, element 82, for his 82nd.
He has thorium, element 90, which is radioactive and kept in a thick lead casket.
And he has a piece of beryllium, element 4, to remind him of his childhood.
And then there's bismuth, element 83. He notes that he doesn't think he'll survive to see his 83rd birthday, but he finds it encouraging to have the metal around anyway.
His description of bismuth is so touching.
It really is. He calls it a modest gray metal, often unregarded, ignored, even by metal lovers.
This is where Sachs's genius empathy bleeds over from the biological into the inorganic. He draws a direct parallel between bismuth and his human patients.
Oh, wow.
He says his feeling as a doctor for the mistreated or marginalized extends to this unregarded metal. He loves it because it is ignored.
He is caring for the overlooked elements just as he cared for the overlooked victims of sleeping sickness and awakenings. But he doesn't just retreat to his table of metals. In early 2015, he undergoes a medical procedure called an embolization.
Let's explain how this works, because it provides him a crucial window of time.
Please do.
The liver is unique because it has a dual blood supply, the portal vein, which brings nutrient-rich blood from the gut, and the hepatic artery, which brings oxygen-rich blood from the heart.
Okay, two supplies.
A healthy liver relies mostly on the portal vein, but liver tumors are greedy. They hijack the hepatic artery to fuel their rapid growth.
So what does the embolization do?
Doctors thread a catheter into the hepatic artery and inject tiny beads to block the blood flow, specifically to the tumors, effectively starving them, while the rest of the liver survives on the portal vein.
It is a brutal, targeted strike. It doesn't offer a cure, but it gives him what he calls an intermission. The tumors shrink temporarily, and he gets a surge of energy.
And what does he do with this precious, hazardous window of time?
He doesn't stay in his apartment looking at lead and bismuth. He travels to North Carolina, to the Lemur Research Center at Duke University.
The juxtaposition is incredible. He is deeply aware of his impending death. His liver is full of dead tumor tissue and beads, and he chooses to go commune with lemurs.
Lemurs? Why lemurs?
Lemurs are prosimians. They are incredibly close to the ancestral stock from which all primates, including humans, arose. They were isolated on the island Madagascar for millions of years, which allowed them to survive, while prosimians elsewhere were outcompeted by monkeys and apes.
He takes profound joy in thinking that 50 million years ago, his own ancestor was a little tree-dwelling creature similar to these leaping, inquisitive animals.
He is connecting himself to the deep, deep time of evolutionary biology on one hand and the eternal time of physics on the other.
He is locating his precise coordinates in the universe.
Mm.
And this synthesis culminates in a moment he describes looking at the night sky.
Ah.
He was in the country, away from city lights, and he saw a sky powdered with stars. He imagines it's like the sky over the Atacama Plateau in Chile, which is one of the clearest viewing points on Earth.
He writes that seeing that celestial splendor suddenly made him realize how little time he had left.
Yeah.
His sense of the heavens' beauty and eternity was inseparably mixed with a sense of transience and death.
This raises a profound psychological point about the emotion of awe.
Research by psychologists like Dr. Keltner shows that experiencing awe actually shrinks the default mode network in the brain, which is the area responsible for ego, self-reflection, and rumination.
So when we look at a sky like that, we're looking at something so unimaginably vast and ancient that our own tiny, brief existence seems mathematically negligible.
For some, being confronted with their own insignificance induces panic.
Sure.
But for Sachs, the awe is a balm for mortal terror. If the universe is this grand, this enduring, then returning his borrowed atoms to it isn't a tragedy, it's just a completion of a natural cycle.
He tells his friends he wants to see a sky like that again when he is dying, and they promise to wheel him outside.
It is a desire to merge back into the eternal.
But as the physical end draws closer, in his final essay, Sabbath, his mind doesn't stay out in the cosmos. It doesn't stay anchored to the periodic table.
No, it goes back.
It drifts all the way backward in time, to his origins, to his family, and to his deepest, most painful traumas. It really brings the emotional journey full circle.
Sabbath is undeniably the most vulnerable essay in the collection. The detachment he practiced with the daily news does not apply to his foundational wounds.
He paints an incredibly vivid picture of his Orthodox Jewish upbringing in Cricklewood, London. He describes the Friday night rituals, his surgeon mother doffing her surgical attire to make a gefilte fish, lighting the ritual candles, the fresh Shabbosk clothes.
He describes his father chanting the blessings over the silver wine cup.
He describes the huge 1930s synagogue on Walm Lane, always packed, the butcher, the baker, the fishmonger, all closing their shutters for the Sabbath. The family visits on Saturday afternoons.
It was this deeply embedded, rhythmic, communal life. It provided a structure and a deep sense of belonging.
But then, at age 18, there's a shattering rupture.
His father forced him to admit his attraction to boys. Sachs told his father it was just a feeling, he hadn't actually done anything, but he begged him not to tell his mother because he knew her strict religious views meant she wouldn't be able to handle it.
But the father did tell her.
The next morning, his mother came down with a look of absolute horror and shrieked at him, "You are an abomination! I wish you had never been born!"
I wish you had never been born. From your own mother, I cannot even fathom the psychological weight of that. Sachs notes she was likely thinking of the verse in Leviticus that condemns homosexuality, but the matter was never spoken of again.
It was just this radioactive, permanent silence in the house.
And he writes that her harsh words made him forever hate religion's capacity for bigotry and cruelty.
The psychological impact of parental rejection, particularly from a mother in a tightly knit religious community, is catastrophic.
I bet.
Neuroscience shows that the pain of social rejection activates the exact same regions in the brain, the anterior cingulate cortex, as physical pain.
Wow.
But physical pain heals. This kind of foundational rejection creates a chronic, enduring trauma response. You can track exactly how this trauma shaped the entire trajectory of his life.
After qualifying as a doctor in 1960, he abruptly removes himself from England entirely. He flees to the New World,
He goes to California.
seeking community among weightlifters on Muscle Beach in Los Angeles. He was craving connection and meaning, which led to a severe, near-suicidal addiction to amphetamines in the 1960s.
Amphetamine addiction in this context is a classic attempt at self-medication for a depleted dopamine system.
Because he lost his family.
Exactly. The profound loss of his family and community left him unmoored. Amphetamines flood the brain with dopamine, providing a synthetic, temporary feeling of profound meaning and connection. But it is unsustainable. He was a man utterly broken by the rejection of his foundational community, trying to manufacture a replacement.
But he eventually finds his salvation, and he finds it in the most unexpected place. He moves to New York and finds meaningful work at a chronic care hospital in the Bronx, Mount Carmel.
This is where he encounters the survivors of the 1920s encephalitis lethargica epidemic, the sleeping sickness.
These were patients who'd been frozen like statues for decades. They were the ultimate outcasts, forgotten by society, institutionalized and ignored.
And Sachs, the outcast from Cricklewood, recognizes them. He administers the experimental drug L-Dopa, which temporarily wakes them up, the basis for his book Awakenings.
He finds his vocation caring for these deeply marginalized patients, becoming a medical storyteller when the art of the medical narrative was almost extinct in modern clinical neurology.
He lived this lonely, monkish, but deeply satisfying existence. He essentially created a new community out of the broken and the forgotten.
For decades, he remains estranged from his religious roots, but in this final essay, he introduces us to his cousin, Robert John Ullman, who serves as a fascinating mirror to Sachs.
Robert John is a brilliant mathematical mind, a Nobel Prize winner in economics who specializes in game theory. But unlike Sachs, Robert John is also deeply, rigorously orthodox.
Sachs marvels that Robert John has absolutely no conflict between his supreme rational reason and his religious faith. Sachs tells this incredible story about Robert John winning the Nobel in 2005.
Oh, this story is amazing.
Robert John brought his massive family to Sweden, required special kosher accommodations at the Grand Banquet in Stockholm, and explicitly told Sachs that if he had been compelled to travel to accept the award on a Saturday, he would have flatly refused the Nobel Prize.
His commitment to the peace, the rules, and the remoteness of the Sabbath would have trumped the highest intellectual honor on the planet.
Just walked away from a Nobel.
Yes. From a game theory perspective, Robert John is operating on a completely different payoff matrix than the secular world. The Sabbath is his ultimate correlated equilibrium, and it is Robert John, along with a cousin named Marjorie, who eventually draws Sachs back into the fold.
In 2014, Sachs breaks a nearly 60-year absence to visit Israel for cousin Marjorie's 100th birthday.
This is the locus of his final healing. Sachs is warmly welcomed by his massive Orthodox extended family, but crucially, he brings his partner, Billy, with him.
And Billy is warmly received as well.
Yes. The attitudes of the family, and perhaps of the culture, had changed. When Robert John invites Sachs and Billy to join their opening Sabbath meal, the profound peace of the Sabbath, which Sachs describes as a stopped world, a time outside of time, finally washes over him without the sting of rejection.
I want to challenge the takeaway here because this dynamic is incredibly relevant to you, our listeners, today. When we are rejected by our families or our communities for who we fundamentally are, as Sachs was for his sexuality, what is the healthy response?
Right.
Is the goal to stay and angrily force them to change their dogma? Or is it, as Sachs experienced, simply removing yourself, living your truth elsewhere, and waiting for the slow march of time to soften those rigid boundaries?
It is a deeply complex psychological question. I don't believe there is a universal prescription. For some individuals, active confrontation and demanding immediate systemic change is the only path that preserves their psychological integrity.
That makes sense.
But Sachs's journey illustrates a different kind of resilience. He removed himself from a toxic environment because it was necessary for his survival. He built a life of immense contribution elsewhere.
And he only returned when they were ready.
Right. He only returned when the rigid structures of his family had eroded enough to accommodate his full humanity. He didn't force the door open. He waited until they unlocked it.
The psychological closure he achieves by doing so is monumental. By December 2014, he finishes his memoir, On the Move, where he finally openly declares his sexuality to the world. He writes that he is living with no more guilty secrets locked up inside me.
He achieves this total liberation just days before finding out his cancer is terminal.
And that brings us to the ultimate metaphor of the book. As he approaches his final days, the Sabbath is no longer about the rigid, bigoted dogma that alienated him as a youth.
It transcends organized religion entirely.
It becomes a profound, universal metaphor for the end of life. He writes that he finds his thoughts drifting to the Sabbath, the seventh day of the week, and perhaps the seventh day of one's life as well, when one can feel that one's work is done, and one may, in good conscience, rest.
In good conscience, rest. It's the perfect concluding chord for a man who spent his life analyzing the restless human mind.
So let's pull all of these threads together. What are the core, actionable takeaways for us today? Why does a book about a dying man matter so much to the living?
I think the most vital insight is a fundamental redefinition of the word gratitude itself. In modern self-help, gratitude has often been watered down into a kind of toxic positivity, a passive thankfulness that your coffee is hot or your commute was short.
But for Sachs...
In Sachs's hands, gratitude is an active, muscular, almost defiant posture. It is the fierce appreciation of the sheer, astronomically unlikely privilege of being a sentient being, a thinking animal on this beautiful planet.
It's finding awe in the neutron, joy in the evolutionary history of lemurs, and peace in the cessation of work, even while your biological body is aggressively failing.
It is choosing vehemence over apathy, right up until the very end.
So who do I think would benefit most from absorbing Sachs's perspective? Honestly, anyone who is facing a transition. If you are dealing with aging parents and watching their world shrink,
If you are struggling with a medical diagnosis of your own and feel that binary door slamming shut,
or, honestly, if you're perfectly healthy but caught up in the modern rat race, stressed about the 24-hour news cycle, and agonizing over things that won't matter in a year, this text forces you to reset your perspective. It washes the mud off the windshield.
it demands that we elevate our view, to look at our lives from that high altitude on the mountain, to see the deep connections between our past traumas and our current coping mechanisms, and to urgently identify what is essential and what is not before the choice is permanently made for us by time.
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. In his essays, Sachs mentions that the poet W.H. Auden believed one should always celebrate one's birthday, no matter how sick or old or tired one feels.
It is a necessary rebellion against the dying of the light.
So, I challenge you. What is your personal periodic table? When the storms hit, when your biology fails, or when the world just feels impossibly fragile and temporary, what are the heavy, unmoving constants in your life that you can drop like an anchor to hold you fast?
Is it a passion, a relationship, a body of knowledge?
Find them, understand how they ground you, and cherish them.
A beautiful and necessary question to carry forward.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Oliver Sacks' gratitude. If this conversation sparked something in you or shifted how you view your own timeline, please hit that subscribe button to the Book Nook so you never miss a deep dive. We have so many more incredible texts to unpack with you.
It has been a privilege to share this time and this perspective with you.
And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us which book you'd like us to explore next. We read every single one,